Hello,
Hi, everyone.
it's Yoga Sutras time again. It's Yoga
And
Sutras time. And Matri is being a sleepyhead because she's up in the middle of the night.
yeah, I had a little trouble this time waking up because it's
Yeah,
so nice and warm under the blankets and it's so cold outside of the
but you
blanket.
did it anyway,
Yeah,
just in the nick of time, as the saying goes.
yeah.
So here we are.
hmm So this
Here
better be good, Samizi. I'm
better be
racing
good.
hard.
Hello, Hashim.
See another one that's up in the middle of the night.
Hi, Roseanne. Yeah, another one up in the middle of the night. You two are in the same time zone, I think, right?
We are. I just went to bed at 12, so that was.
Uh-huh. And now
Hi,
we have Raj. Hi, Raj. And so where we are now is
the end of Yoga Chapter 1.
we are at the end of chapter 1. And so we've talked all about what is yoga and introduced klishta and aklishta and abhyasa and vairagya practice and non-attachment kinds of concentration. We talked about Shraddha, Virya, Smriti, Samadhi, Prajna. We talked about Om. We talked about the 13 yucky things, the obstacles, and the solution of one-pointedness. And we talked about methods of stabilizing the mind. And then this last part is sort of everything else. And I called it the results of stabilizing the mind. After you stabilize the mind, then what happens?
Sounds juicy.
And so there is our thing, and I will take that out and bring in. Yeah, she does look pretty cold, doesn't she, Roz? Looks pretty cold over there. Assessing by the bundled upness, huh?
Yeah.
And so there we are. Yoga Sutras 4041.
It dropped 0 degrees at night, Simon's in here in Holland.
Wow. Brr. It's not down to that here. We've had some chilly nights, but not cold
And
like
when I
that.
woke up yesterday, I don't know what it is now. I didn't look yet, but when I woke up yesterday, it was 7 degrees in the living room.
It was 7.
Yeah.
Well, that's not totally cold, is it?
No, that's doable. That's just getting out, put on a heater, and bundle up like I do right now, and I have a little heat going
Hi, Matesh.
right now, so I'm okay.
All righty. So here we go. Mind, I love this section here. I think this is pretty cool. Once the mind is reasonably stabilized and clear, I add the
I
reasonably.
like that yeah. I
Huh?
noticed that immediately. I was just going to say thank you for adding reasonably.
The deeper processes of yoga can begin. The mind eventually becomes like a transparent crystal and is a purified tool for the subtler explorations of the gross and subtle levels. Such a mind can explore the whole range of objects, even the smallest or the largest, which is one of the sutras. There are only 4 levels of meditation on an object. These are systematically experienced all the way to the level of unmanifest matter. And there's a series of sutras in this block that talk about them. From these meditations on gross and subtle objects come purity and inner luminosity, higher wisdom, reducing the impressions that drive karma, and the experience of objectless samadhi. So that's a pretty good consequence of what comes after the stabilizing of the mind. Along with these practices are the whole range of meditation practices in chapter 2 to 4 including the minimizing of gross colorings, which is in chapter 2, dealing with subtle thoughts. The 8 rungs are introduced in the next chapter, and the subtler explorations through samyama, which is dharana, dhyana, samadhi, concentration, meditation, and samadhi, and that's introduced in chapter 3. Okay, there we go. When through such practices as described in the previous block of sutras, remember that was the 4 attitudes, and let's take a quick look at that. I'm going to click back here, okay? Remember that there were 4 attitudes with people, remember that? And there were 5 suggestions given for stabilizing the mind, and then the catch-all that says, or whatever you find pleasing and useful will stabilize the mind. Right, Mom?
Yes.
The mind develops the power of becoming stable on the smallest size object as well as on the largest. Then the mind truly comes under control. And the fancy word, there's param anu, from the minutest to the parama mahatma, the largest. Vyasa comments, I like the Vyasa comment. Entering into the subtle, it attains the position of steadiness upon the smallest of the small, down to an atom. Entering into the large, the position of mental steadiness reaches up to the largest of the large. His great power consists in not being turned back by any check while running along both these lines. The mind of the yogi, full of this power, does not again stand in need of the mental embellishment due to habitual practice. Here is a meditation on the smallest and largest. I don't know if this video plays. I'll try it here. Let's see if this plays and if you can see it. Can you see that, Mom?
I can, but I get a direct stream that's quicker, so I'm always going on Facebook.
This is just an attempt to capture that principle.
You're just trying to burn the place down?
No, we're just having, what do they call it with fish in Louisiana, where they blackened fish? We're just having blackened veggies.
Blackened veggies, wow.
Raj says that he can hear and see.
What, Mom?
Raj says he can hear and see, so that's
good. Look at this, the scale of these things. Isn't this awesome?
Yeah.
Where's us?
This is in our universe.
So.
And look at this big sun that's coming up here. Arcturus is a sun, and look how much bigger than it is than what we know.
So this is our sun?
Yeah. Yeah, that's our sun.
No, that's already very, very, very small. And it's not ours anyway.
But we think it's ours. I'll go back to see.
See,
look.
Well, whose is it?
See, look. See, there's the planets. See, there's the Earth. And then there's Uranus.
My anus is mine.
And there's Neptune. And look how big Jupiter is compared to the Earth. And it makes the Earth look small just to look at Jupiter.
Yes.
I made this video.
This is cool.
It's a pretty good concept, but the tech in it is not very good. And there's our sun.
Isn't sun in the Vedic approach is actually a beast?
And in this picture here, our Jupiter is only 1 pixel of size compared to that sun. And look how much bigger Jupiter is than us. And so it gives us the notion when we talk about meditation on a small object and a big object.
This is big.
This is, huh?
This are big.
And there's Arcturus, which is a pretty big sun.
Where is that?
It's somewhere up there, out there.
No, you're so sad.
Now the sun is 1 pixel.
Now the sun is 1 pixel. And there's Telegoose. Beetlejuice.
Beetlejuice.
And there's Antares. And there's our galaxy, the Milky Way. Pretty big, huh? And yoga is the mastery, integration, transcendence of all the fluctuations of the mind field, including the Milky Way. And see, now we're getting small.
So this is all the domain of space. Once you're beyond space, then it becomes the realm.
And I will add here, while this is playing, that internally, gradually, internally, in the subtler moments of meditation, we can actually have some degree of experience of this kind of phenomenon. If you attempt to do it, you can have a sense of meditating on the Milky Way. We all know this. Anyway, so there it was. Okay, Raj put another video there. We'll all look at that later, I guess. We don't have the means here to look at it here.
Hi, Gurvinder.
Did Gurvinder show up? Hi, Gurvinder.
He did.
And so anyway, we can experiment with this practice here, literally internally. And so, you know, when I guide a practice, some of you have heard I say, you know, we beware of a toe or a little part like that. And then there's the part where we say, be aware of the whole body. Huh? It's sneaky stuff. And so the attempt for us to be aware of the entire whole body as one entity. Think about it. Most of the time, most of us operate in a relatively small range of sizes. The size of the room that we're in right now, the size of the computer, the size of the couch, the size of the other furniture here, it's all relatively similar size. Look what happens when you get in an airplane. And if you watch in an airplane, you look out the window and you look down at the earth when you're at 30, 40,000 feet, everything looks very, very different. Or when you're on a mountaintop, like in the high Himalayas, and you look out, size is absolutely fascinating. And we can do the same thing internally. Pretend that you have the ability to meditate on a single cell somewhere in your body. Now, I'm not saying that this is easy, but this is, Patanjali is giving us a tip here. how do we know that we're really making good progress? And this is one of the tips he's giving us. Do we have an increasing capacity to be aware of a range of sizes of objects? Now, we may not have the ability to do the whole known universe. It's 14 billion light years and all like that. But there's some degree of this range of very, very small to very, very big that some benefit comes. And this, I can tell you, is absolutely true. So don't just glance over this thing here. Play with it sometimes and be aware of something small, be aware of something big.
I was playing with that yesterday. It was very fun.
You what?
I was playing with that yesterday. It's better fun.
How were you playing with it?
Oh, I was thinking of the point in the center of the chest. The smallest.
A point. So here is example. Here is a napkin. And I just took the pen and I made a little dot. See, I made a little dot on the napkin.
That's like a show and tell.
This is a show and tell. And so we can play with things like that. We can play with the idea of something very, very, very small. And we can play with
amazing is when they happen at the same time. When you're getting very, very, very small and yet it's expansive.
Yes, at the same time.
What Yoga Sutras? Which one is that?
This is Yoga Sutra 1.40. We're in the last block of sutras in chapter 1. Anyway, there's something to it. And so play with it. That's the thing that I will invite you to do. Just play with it. When the modifications of the mind have become weakened, the mind becomes like a transparent crystal. In other words, when the distractions become weakened, then the mind becomes, think about this, like a transparent crystal. If I remember correctly, I have some pictures of some crystals down here. And thus can easily take on the qualities of whatever object observed. And there is some pictures that I grabbed off of internet of crystals. The spirit of this is just a graphic object that if you take a clear crystal and you put it in front of a black sheet of paper or whatever that is, the crystal becomes black. If you take the crystal and you put it in front of something blue, the crystal takes on the color blue. If you put the crystal in front of orange or red or whatever that is, it takes on the hue of orange or purple. There is a crystal in front of a fingertip. And so it takes fingertip. There's green. Now, these are just symbols. These are just metaphoric symbols of this. But the principle is that when the mind starts to become stable and clear, and you want to meditate on an object, that object becomes very, very clear. I'll use a very practical, down-to-earth example.
Oh my, look at how we're transmitting.
I'm sorry, look at what?
Look at the screen we're transmitting at the moment on Facebook. Or is it just me? But Gorinda just...
I have no idea what you're talking about.
I just was looking because Gorinda made a comment as, are you sharing your screen? So I went from Be Live to Facebook and it's a one big distorted image. I'm not sure if I'm the only one seeing that.
Well, I don't know either.
Right now it's showing meditation on the small and the large. Now it says hello all with Govinda.
But maybe it's just me.
Might be just you. What's this one?
I cannot see it.
Yeah, that's right.
So
Okay, I had the wrong thing up there. This is what I'm trying to show you. So it just switched. So there you go. That should be it.
The mind becomes one with whatever.
Did you see the video that I transmitted before? Raj said he saw it. Am I remembering that correctly, Ma?
Yeah.
Anyway, so this thing is saying that the mind can become like a transparent crystal. This is just an attempt. It's good now.
Good.
Looks all clear to me. It's okay. All right, so I just pushed the wrong button on with the mouse there temporarily. Anyway, so this is just a symbolic, metaphorical attempt to make this point clear, that when the mind becomes like a transparent crystal, it takes on the coloring of what it is. An example of that that's very, very practical is if there's a person in your life and you've had a terrible conflict with that person. Maybe it's a divorced spouse. Maybe there was an abuse in your childhood and you keep remembering that abusive moment. I'm not trying to, be a psychotherapist, but to the yogi, if we meditate on that object and we have a clear mind, the total situation will become clear. The entire situation will become clear. And it will include the reduction in the coloring of that other person in your mind field.
Oh, I thought you meant literally of the other person.
It's not, I'm not talking about voodoo.
I understand.
If one has been an abuse victim, it's no longer about that person. That person is long gone from our life, but we're carrying around the old memory. I think we all understand this, don't we?
Mm-hmm.
That we carry around old crap, whatever it is. And so how does the yogi attenuate this samskara? When we get into chapter 2, and it talks about the attenuating of the klishta vrittis and the stages of attenuation, how do we do it? If we have trained the mind becomes like a crystal. And so whatever that raga or devesha, that attraction or aversion, whatever it is, we have the ability to call it in front of us in meditation. And the object of meditation becomes that troublesome memory. And the whole thing becomes clear.
Is this what Swami Rama says when you do the Guru Chakra, the burning?
That's a different practice. That's a different practice, Guru Chakra. This is saying that you do samyama on your memory. I'm sorry, I wish I could tell you more about it. I cannot. I'm not capable of saying much more about it. Swami Rama continually talks about introspection, inspection within, and that if we will do that, the guidance will come from within on how to do that. This has been my experience, and all I can do is tell you the same thing. And this is the best I've been able to come up with as a symbol for this sutra, is literally to go find some photographs of transparent crystal, just to show you the principle that one crystal, whatever it is in the presence of, it takes on the coloring of that crystal. So if my mind field is crystal clear, then whatever samskara I meditate upon, it will be revealed its true nature. And then I will be able to do viveka, which is introduced in chapter 2 as the reason for the 8 rungs. It's around Sutra 26 of chapter 2. The karma shaya is filled with samskaras. Sutra 36, I'll go here briefly. And I'm sorry, we all just have to connect the dots ourselves. If there's a way to explain it to you better, I apologize. I don't know how to do it. I simply don't know how to do it. The three-part process of samyama is gradually applied to the finer states or stages of practice. Why? Why do we do that? So that we can do, now I don't have the link right here, so that we can do that thing called viveka, the discernment. And if I can discern, then I can get beyond the avidya, the ignorance of thinking that this thing has something to do with me. I tried to use a moment ago the example of a bad experience that we carry around like baggage. Somebody says, oh, I have this fear of something. It must be from a past life experience. Well, it's not. Who cares that it's a past life? That's irrelevant.
It's here now.
It's here right now in the karmashaya. It is samskara that's in the field of the karmashaya. If we will go into samadhi on that memory, which none of us want to do because we're trying to get away from that memory. If we're willing to do samyama, samadhi on that memory, and we have done something to clarify, to turn our mind into crystal-like, then we will see that whole situation with clarity. And what we will discover for ourselves, that I have made a mistake. I have related that old memory to somebody called me. And I think that this has something to do with me. But it does not. I am Purusha. I am not those memories, regardless of what the memory is.
So this is the discernment of self and non-self.
It's the transcendent, it's going beyond avidya. If you say that it's discerning between self and not self, that's your choice to do that. That's not the point that's being made here. This is about that the mind becomes clear, like transparent. When the mind focuses on an object in the mind field, it becomes totally absorbed in that object, allowing you to see the nature of that object very clearly. You systematically explore, encounter, examine, and gradually set aside with non-attachment the many false identities, attractions, aversions, and fears.
I'm remembering Swami Rama says that we have three obstacles, and you mentioned it many times as well. And one of them is that the mind is not clear and that the senses are irreliable. And so when the one of the three, then, everything gets better with this.
Okay, well, maybe that for everybody. Maybe that summarizes it for everybody. I'm doing the best I can. I can't do any better. One type of such engrossment called samapati is one in which there is a mixture of three things: a word or name going with the object, the meaning of the identity of the object, and the knowledge associated with that object. This engrossment is called savatarka samapati, associated with gross objects. Savatarka is related to gross objects. If you really want to pursue this, I'm sorry to tell you this, but you're going to have to dig into this. I can only say so much. I wish I was more skilled at being able to explain this to you, but I'm not. I've done the best I can here. And so this is about savitarka, samapati, the absorption. The absorption is a little bit like that crystal. The crystal, when it's in the domain of something, it takes on that coloring. It becomes engrossed with that. It can be a gross level thing, a vitarka. It can be a savichara object, and like that. This is an important point here. I used apples down here. You may have seen me do this at some setting or another. If you want, Ma, you can interrupt and tell the story, but I'm going to start here, and if you want to tell the story, you can. I'll shut up. But I've done this quite a few times with a room full of people and say, would everybody please think of an apple? And I say, okay, has everybody thought of an apple? And I'll make sure every person in the room has thought of an apple. And then I say, okay, how many of you thought of a red apple? And the hands go up. How many, did any of you think of a green apple? The hands go up. I'll say, did anybody think of a yellow apple? Now, this is not a yellow apple. And people will say, some people will say yes. Did you think of an apple with a bite taken out of it? Or did your apple have a stem in it? And so the point here is that every one of the people thought of an apple. And why did they think of an apple? Because I said the mantra apple. So there's a composite. There is a particular apple. There is APPLE. I wish I knew other languages in the moment, but I don't have another language in mind. But in the various languages of the world, there's a different mantra to go with it. Not everybody speaks English. So not everybody calls this an apple. There are other names for it. But the mantra apple is the sound that goes with it. It's a commixture of three parts. It's the word or the name of that object. It's the specific object being observed. I'm thinking of a medium-sized red apple that has a stem. And then there is the nature of appleness. So everybody who thought of a red apple or a green apple or a yellow apple, whether it was large or medium or small, every one of the people thought of apple. That's this number 3 here. It's the nature of that category of object. And everybody thought of the mantra APPLE if you speak English. Otherwise, if you don't know English and I say apple, you don't think of it because that sound has no meaning. The point here is that this is how you and I have constructed reality. And once again, if you take only what I'm saying and you do not explore it internally, this information here is useless. Sorry to say it like that, but it's virtually useless information. I think, I can't prove this, but I think, we're a pretty sharp group of people, and maybe all of you have played with this already and are familiar with it. But if you will play with this, you will come to see for yourself, not because I'm trying to give you an example, but you will see for yourself that we have constructed an entire constellation of what we perceive reality to be. And it is over and over and over a composite of name. Now I know we can say philosophers, I know what you're talking about. In Vedanta, they talk about Namarupa. That's what we're talking about. Okay, fine, it's Namarupa. And if we say that, then all we have done is become a philosopher and we have skipped the sadhana. All we have done is one more trap of falling into an intellectual understanding of saying, look how smart I am. I understand Nama Rupa.
Wordsmith.
And become a wordsmith. The only way that this principle that Patanjali is telling us here will make sense is if we've done the practices and all of the stuff leading up to this sutra here, and if we're willing to look at the world around us. We can do this 24 hours a day, right in the middle of life. We give an object, we look at an object. I'm looking over there at a chair. Chair, C-H-A-R-R, the mantra cha, 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 chair, chair. There is a chair over there. It has green covering on it, and it has brown wooden legs.
And Joe likes to sit on it.
And Joe likes to sit on it. He used to put his keys on it, but he doesn't do that anymore because somebody accidentally walked out with his car keys one night. And then he didn't have his car keys. But there's another chair over here that has an orange cloth on it and some stuff that I left on. But anyway, this gives us some insight as to how we end up confused, How is it possible that everything is one reality? The philosophy says there's only one absolute non-dual reality. Oh, okay, I remember that. I read that. The definition of that is Brahman. Okay, got that down. Check mark. I understand it. I'm trying to tell you here that if we will actually explore these three things here, we will see that Patanjali has given us a tremendous, tremendous piece of insight here. And then as we go subtler and subtler, the Sutra before talked about the large objects and the small objects. Well, it doesn't matter if we're talking about the largest object in the universe or if we actually truly are introspecting within at the subtler and subtler aspects of our own being. So you say, well, give me a list of the small objects internally I'm supposed to look at. Sorry, cannot do that. You have to explore within. There's just simply no escaping that. If we explore within, we will find many, many thought patterns, and we will see for ourselves that we have constructed a reality around it. We have constructed a universe. We have constructed a world. One of the stories that's in the Tripura Rahasya is that one of the teachers takes the student inside of a mountain. And I think inside the mountain, 12,000 years goes by while he's in the mountain, and comes back out and everybody he knew is dead. And there's all this activity inside the mountain. And the point of the teacher to the student is, which one is reality? The 12,000 years inside the mountain? I mean, it didn't seem like 12,000 years. Only when we left the mountain and all of a sudden you realize that out here, 12,000 years went by. But inside the mountain, it was just a short period of time. Why do those two seem so different? Because we have formed a composite reality. This is what has happened. And we cannot simply fall for the trap of reading the book and memorizing the thing and say to impress one another, well, I remember reading that in the Tripura Rahasya it said so-and-so, therefore it's true. Somebody else says, aha, but that's not what the Bible says. The Bible says so-and-so. You know, the Bhagavad Gita says so-and-so, Patanjali says so-and-so, and then we can get into philosophers' debates. I maybe sound like I'm being obnoxious with this, and I'm not meaning to, but I am suggesting that there really is something being suggested to us here. And the simplest example, I think Vyasa uses the example of cows. Yeah, here it is. In commenting on this sutra, the sage Vyasa uses the cow to make the point of discriminating between word, object, and essential knowledge. So here is the examples of cows, which is just like the apples above or the cars further below. I did apples because we all eat apples. Most of us don't live around cows. So I came up with apples.
I have a question.
This principle is so extremely important to understand that all these visual examples are provided here. Notice that each of these is called cow, even though the objects referred to are different. Yet in each is the essence or nature of cowness. Every one of these four cows has cowness. And everyone has the mantra cow, but they are different particular things.
No question.
Joe has a question.
So is the object of knowing the object is connecting with the cowness or appleness or chairness? So there's a name, there's an object, but there's also, like you said, there's a reality, or I guess it's not like chairness or cowness. Or
so what are you driving at?
What I'm driving at, where that concentration goes to this knowing is going into that cowness or chairness, not looking at the object. I know it's a chair, it's a chair, it's a chair.
No, it's not a chair. It's not a cow, it's not a chair, it's not an apple.
It just looks, because it's all just nothing.
It's all Brahma. I'm sorry, Joe, I cannot do it for you. And it's not merely one. Do not think of this as something you're just going to think through one time intellectually, like a bright fellow that you are, and say, okay, now I understand the concept.
I'm trying to understand how to work with it.
You just got to keep doing it. Do it with cows, do it with chairs, do it over and over and over and over again. Every beautiful object, if you're sitting there and you have the most beautiful, elegant, swirling purple lights come inside meditation, you say, wow, I think I'm seeing the divine light of God. Use your crystal-like mind and look at it closely, and we will realize that it too is a composite. And it's a false reality.
So whatever I conceive is false.
Huh?
Whatever conceivable or perceivable
If
is false.
you can conceive it, it's false.
Yeah.
If you can see it, it's false. If you can smell it, it's false. If you can taste it, it's false. If you can touch it, it's false. If you can hear it, it's false.
It's all bullshit.
It's all bullshit. And we may do it 1,000 times. We may come to the conclusion that it's all bullshit. But we cannot just do that a few times and then say, okay, I've done that, check that off the list. I've done that, and I understand now that it's all bullshit.
We have to learn to live with this constant realization.
Yes, and it falls away, it falls away, it falls away. And this is the higher meaning of paravairagya, supreme non-attachment, because it's not a one-time thing that says, okay, I've studied this and I've concluded that it's all bullshit. It's just over and over and over and over and over again. I try to find anything that's real. And I cannot find anything that's real. That's when you know you're on the right track, when you say, shit, I'm trying to find a cow. I can't find one. Can't find an apple.
It's all apparent, not real.
Yeah, and so we're stuck with this. This is why the yoga works the way that it does. And that's one of the reasons that the Yoga Sutras are so hard to understand. These principles are profoundly deep. And on the surface, they sound very simple. Okay, Vyasa says, look at cows. I decided I'm going to also talk about apples because everybody knows apples. It's easier to think of apples. Discerning 3 parts of a meditation object: word, object, and knowledge. Here's the same thing. Here's the word car, and I think this is, what is this?
Walter.
French and Spanish. So is it a car, a voiture, or a coche? Well, it's 3 different mantras for the same principle. The mind automatically thinks of a specific car when the sound car is in the mind. So I say car, and you think of a blue BMW. She thinks of a little silver Honda. I think of my red truck. Matri thinks of her little red car. It's a cute little red car. But when we say car, we each automatically go to a specific one.
We have our own delusions.
We have our own delusions. That's right. Try this and you will find that it is hard, if not almost impossible, to think of an object without being a specific object. Try to think of car without thinking of a specific car. It's just about impossible to do, isn't it? You think of a car, okay, I can think of not my truck, and so instead what comes? Matri's little red car that's in Holland. Okay, well, I'm not going to think of her little red car anymore. Okay, there's Joe's blue BMW. Oh, damn, can't get rid of cars. Uh-oh, here comes Rojo's silver Honda. Whatever am I going to do about these? All these stupid cars are coming and going. How the hell am I ever going to think of just car without it being specific?
Because there ain't.
What?
Because there ain't. But you find out in the process.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you. What?
But because there ain't such a car.
There ain't?
There is
ain't.
not.
There ain't. It's not.
So anything you conceive or perceive outside has a name, but all of this is just like proof, like a mirage. It's just like pretend.
And I'm wanting to suggest, in some sense, that what you just did of drawing a conclusion off of it. When you just said a couple sentences, you drew a conclusion. You said something like, in other words, blah, blah, blah. And I'm trying to suggest that that is a dodge and it will keep us trapped. Better to keep trying to find car instead of drawing a conclusion. As soon as you draw a conclusion, then you say, okay, well, in other words, it's just not there.
Like you throw a bone to your mind.
Yeah, okay. Now I say, okay, yeah, I got that metaphor, throw a bone to the mind. And guess what? We've just gotten trapped again. The cognitive dissonance that we get into by trying to find the car that's independent of a particular car, that cognitive dissonance has the possibility of allowing our mind to finally surrender because it has not the capacity to understand it. And finally, maybe the mind will give up. And then you understand the meaning of Ishvara Pranadhana, surrender. Meanwhile, we can read books and go to read libraries filled with books on the definition of surrender and never get there.
For any conclusions I may offer from my mind is all just like you said, it's a dodge.
Yeah, any conclusion you draw is the mind's attempt to think that it is supreme. It is intelligent. It can understand this. And it's better to keep trying and trying and trying and let the mind finally get beat up so bad that it says it finally gives up. There's nowhere to go.
Like Yama offering Nachiketas all of these.
Yeah, Yama's trying to offer Nachiketas all sorts of objects. And Nachiketas is saying, it's not enough. It's not enough. It's all bullshit. I want to know the real answer.
The mind is like Yama. It's trying. Okay.
The most important of the three is the knowledge or essence of car-ness itself. This is very tricky to understand because we so consistently think of a small or large car, a red or blue car. It is the essence of car-ness that we finally want to uncover. It is beyond shape, size, and color. It is formless, shapeless, and colorless. Somebody type there. Let me see what the comment is. Any conclusion you can come to is the mind's attempt to being supreme. Yes, it's a true statement, Jamie, but don't stop with that sentence you just said, because saying the sentence that you just said, saying the sentence, quote, any conclusion I come to is my mind's attempt to being supreme. That sounds like I now have an answer. Listen carefully to the words. I'm not shooting holes in your words. I'm listening to your words. But when we say those words, somebody inside of me can say, okay, now I've brought it down to a simple sentence that I understand.
We're done.
We're done. Finish. Slap of the hands like that. Joe's going, oh, done. Got that figured out.
But this is like a koan. We have to realize.
Any conclusion you can come to is the mind's attempt to being supreme. And we go, yep, okay. I said, does that make sense, Joe? Joe says, yep, that's right. Sounds good to me. Rojo says, yep, sounds good to me. Zachary sitting over there says, yep, sounds good to me.
No, you're saying, what the hell are you guys talking
Yeah,
about?
he was in the meditation room being quiet, and he heard all this noise in here and me screaming. So he said, what are these people doing?
Yeah, we're debating silence here by yelling at each other.
And so I hope that makes sense, Jamie. I'm not being picky. I'm not meaning to be picky about your sentence, because your sentence is a true statement. Any conclusion you come to is the mind's attempt to being supreme. Yes, it's a true statement. But notice the fact that when we come to a conclusion like that, some part of the antakarna feels satisfied. This is what people do in a philosophy class. When they're having a debate in the philosophy class, you're having a sparring match. Who's going to win the philosopher's debate? And the scorekeepers, the judges of the debate, says this team from this university wins the philosopher's debate because they out-debated the other team. And then we say, look, we understand something. And the point is here that ultimately it's a trap. The mind is happy because now it thinks that it has figured it out, and it now has an answer. Far better to stay confused. I know that sounds odd, but if the mind stays confused and the mind stays in what is commonly known as cognitive dissonance, then gradually the mind will realize that it does not have the capacity to understand this. And then you can go quote the Bhagavad Gita or sages and Upanishads that throughout human history, it has been said, the mind does not have the capacity to understand truth. You must go beyond the mind. And so it is a true statement, but that's a cop-out too. We simply must allow ourselves to get totally frustrated with this because I cannot figure it out. And then eventually the mind will give up. Eventually the mind will give up. And it's absolutely irritating. Don't take my word for it. Go listen again to the story Swami Rama tells when he's told the teacher, I'm going to go to the river and suicide. I'm going to drown myself in the river because I'm not enlightened yet. You told me this was going to take 14 years and I would wake up. And I've been at this for 17 years now. We hear this story over and over and over in slightly different ways. But it is that you simply must allow yourself to finally become absolutely exasperated that this wonderful, beautifully intelligent mind that I have does not have the capacity to know truth or reality or God. It's not big enough. It doesn't have the ability to do that. And I know it's not fun, but the cognitive dissonance that comes is a good thing.
But I think also everything that mind represents is also realized it's all BS.
Pranadhana is a process way of interacting with Ishvara. Yeah, okay, it's a nice sentence. Now the mind is happy. The mind is happy.
We're done. That's it.
We're done. Pranadhana, okay, I understand. Pranadhana is a process way of interacting with Ishvara. There is no such thing as Ishvara. Sorry to tell you that. There is no Ishvara. Ishvara is a delusion. Ishvara is avidya. Ishvara is Maya. It's one of the appearances. We give it a name. It's the same thing we were just talking about, apples and cows. We give it a name. We call it Ishvara. We translate that into English and we say that's God. And that God is on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel in Rome. Michelangelo painted it. It's a bearded, gray-haired man with his fingers sticking out like this, touching another. That's God. That's Ishvara. Notice how we get our minds off track. We think that we've understood that. And so we can end up saying Pranadhana is a way of interacting with Ishvara. Well, we have fallen into the trap of believing that there is a thing called Ishvara and that there is a person called me who has the ability to do something called interact. And there is a thing called process/way. And I'm not meaning to pick on you either. I'm saying that once again, the thing that finally ultimately is beneficial is the cognitive dissonance when we shoot holes in our language. We use the language as if we know what we're talking about. And we say, no, let's go find us a good pundit, a Sanskrit scholar, and he can tell us the ideology of the word pranadhana. And he can explain to us in good Sanskrit language the word Ishvara. And we can all sit around and sound very, very logical and very intellectual. But that's not what the yogi is doing. The yogi is trying to observe. This is what Patanjali is trying to tell us here by realizing that everything we do, we give it a word, there's an essence, and then we give it a particular thought. It's right there in the sutra. And then you got a jerk like me being a troublemaker saying to you, please notice your mind's habit of compromising and being willing to accept a philosophical conclusion. And I'm not picking on anybody. This is the nature of what our minds do. And the mind is the obstacle, not a unique comment. You know, what's the obstacle? What is it that's standing between me as this and the realization of this? This huge chunk of stuff in the middle. I'm sorry, I'm sitting there tapping on the wall, but you can't see it. What is it that's standing between me out here and the Atman here? All of this. And this is called the mind. And our mind is a wonderful, wonderful instrument for engaging in the world out here. That's what it's for. But when it tries to understand this, it's going to apply the same kind of thinking that it's going to do to write a computer program or cook dinner or write a book or do any of the things that we do out here. But when it tries to do that to find this, it's not possible. Don't take my word for it. Read Upanishads, read all these ancient sages, and they tell us over and over and over and over and over again that infinity, truth, capital R reality, God, cannot be understood by the mind. But yet notice the habit of our mind. It keeps trying to do it anyway. Now, it's not that we should take their word for it just because Buddha says it, therefore it's true, so let's stop asking. No, ask and try to figure it out, but understand that what we are up against is avidya. We are up against avidya. I have fallen asleep into the silly notion that I am an intelligent mind and a human being and that I can figure all this shit out. Sorry, it doesn't work that way. Cannot measure infinity with a tiny little foot rule. I mean, that's just a silly little comment. It's one Swami Rama has used from time to time. But this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to measure the 14.5 billion light year known universe in feet or meters or kilometers or miles or light years. 14 billion light years. Even when we say a big number like that, we're still measuring with the foot rule, aren't we? And we think we know what we're talking about. And I'm just trying to say here that Patanjali has given us some pretty good clues here, but the frustrating part of it is every one of us has to go through this ourselves. Now, I just made these little pictures to say there's small cars or large cars, there's different color cars. This is a car, this is a bus, this is an ambulance, this is a police car, this is a regular car. There's all this diversity. When the memory or storehouse of modification of mind is purified, then the mind appears to be devoid of its own nature, and only the object on which it is contemplate appears to shine forward. This type of engrossment is called nirvitarka samapatti. It means that when we really, really are engrossed in that object, there is nothing else. If it's an apple, then there is nothing other than apple. And then we will go into cognitive dissonance on the nature of that apple, and we will realize I don't have any idea what an apple is because I've conjured it up. It's a false thing. And it's really Brahman. And that won't be satisfying. If it's satisfying to say that the apple is Brahman, it means we've sold out one more time. We're just stuck with this.
You're not going to stop. You're going to keep going.
What, me?
Yeah.
Yeah, no. But that's how this works.
Listen, this is...
Whoops, what is this here? And so
no one is safe today around you.
No, but this is how this deal works.
No. This is what Nisargadatta Maharaj used to do.
That's right. There's no way. There's no escaping it. In the same way that these engrossments operate with gross objects in the Savitarka Samapatti, the engrossment with subtle objects also operates and is known as Savichara and Nirvichara Samapatti. So we think, I'm going to go inside and I'm going to go to the spiritual realm where I can find gods and goddesses and deities and flowing rivers and heaven and all of this kind of silliness. Guess what? It's just as crazy there. It's just as much a dream as this world. This is why the ancient sages have repeatedly said that what we're doing out here is just another version of a dream world. But we have to do it ourselves. I'm just being a troublemaker. Don't let my giving you a hard time be a replacement for your own confusion. Dive in, get confused. Allow yourself to get frustrated. I know it's not fun. I absolutely know it's not fun.
Never be satisfied.
Huh?
Never be satisfied.
Yeah, as soon as we become satisfied with one of our philosophical comments, the real sadhana ends for now.
So it goes in stages. You get to some point, you think you found it, and then you start digging again.
And then you realize one more time, I'm an idiot. My last year before all this shit fell away, I would have a day come and I would have some insight. And I'm telling you the truth. I'd sit there and I'd go, wow, finally today, finally I understand something. Yesterday, I mean, I'm not making this up. The words would come into me, literally, yesterday I was a fool. Today, finally, I understand something. It happened. And then what would happen, literally the next day, I discovered it happened again. It happened for a while there, every day for a while. And the pattern was unfolding. Next day, some new insight would come, and I realized what I thought I knew yesterday, I was an absolute fool. Finally, today.
And you're convinced at the moment that what you know is
totally convinced. Now there's just this tremendous clarity. I understand something today. Yesterday I was a fool. And then guess what? After a while I realized tomorrow would come and the same thing was repeating. I started to realize here's the pattern.
This is what happens to false prophets. You get stuck in one of those.
This is what happens with false prophets. You fall asleep into one of those delusions. And then you say, this is it. I'm done. I'm finished. But it just kept going and going. It got worse and worse and worse until that one day when Swami Rama says to me, how are you doing? This loving, pure tone of voice came out of him. I wouldn't even look at him. He walked into the room where I was. I was sitting at a desk out there. It doesn't matter where it was. And he walked in the door. I wouldn't even look at him. I knew who walked in the door. I could feel him walk in. How are you doing? He said, that particular voice.
Like he didn't know.
Yeah, like he didn't know. And I said to him, I'm stuck. He says, what do you want? And I said, I want this journey to be done. I was worn out. I was completely, totally exasperated. I did not mean I want samadhi, I want turiya. I did not mean that. I just want it to stop.
That's another concept.
Yeah, because it's just another concept. And so it was not that. I just want the journey to be done. That's what I said to him, done. And if in that moment it would have been possible to have complete, total annihilation, not suicide, but total annihilation, I would have taken it. No more consciousness, no more anything. I would have taken it. That's what I meant. I'm stuck. What do you want? I want the journey to be done. And that's when he said, okay, don't come back to me anymore unless I send for you. The next thing that will happen is the piercing of the bindu. And so in my own little corner of life, I've discovered that what these sages have been saying is true. It's totally, absolutely frustrating. But when we get to the point where we have what we commonly know as cognitive dissonance, where we think we've figured this out, like some of this beautifully intelligent sentences that you've said and that Jamie said and Marianne said, these are wonderful, bright comments. And Rod says it's mind-blowing. Repeated cognitive dissonance has the possibility for surrender. And yeah, and just don't fall asleep in that comment, Raj. You know what I'm saying.
There's no winning today, Raj.
We have to keep doing these practices to get the mind into cognitive dissonance. Shake it out of the rut, except you cannot shake it out of the rut. We think that we're shaking it out of the rut. And it's in its nature to be in a rut. You cannot shake it out of the rut. All you can do is surrender it. But surrendering the mind is not an action, because if I say I'm going to surrender the mind, then there is an I who is claiming to do something, calling surrender. Does that make sense? So we've already fallen into the trap one more time.
That's what the Bible says, you have to die before you're born.
And this is the principle that says you have to die before you're reborn. Now that gets misunderstood and gets turned into a psychological thing that's done in the context of a subculture called a church with priests and all of that kind of stuff. And the subtler, deeper meaning of it ends up kind of getting lost. One more time. Anyway, I'm going to keep going here because I don't want to drag this around anymore, but this is hard-hitting stuff. These 4 varieties of engrossment, whoops, let me turn this, sorry, I need to put this back on here. These 4 kind of engrossments are the only kinds of concentration samadhi which are objective and have a seed as an object. These are the only 4. Now here's a place, when you go through these sections here, I'm not saying don't go back and read these sutras. Read them, hang out with them, hang out with these four descriptions of samapati, of engrossment, and play with it yourself. And as I have played with this and pondered this, I ended up do it as if you are the teacher grading the student called Patanjali. I'm just saying that as a kind of tip. So as if what you're doing is you're looking over the shoulder of Patanjali saying, does this fellow Patanjali know what he's talking about? Look at these 4 samapatis like this and see if it makes sense. This is what I did with it, and I ended up saying, you know, he's really right. These 4 varieties of samapati really are pretty accurate. It sounds right. Then you can give yourself a check mark and say, okay, I'm right. And you can give a check mark to Patanjali and say, okay, Pat, I think you're on track. You know, Pat Angeli.
Yeah, we got it.
Pat Angeli. Say, you did a good job there, Pat. And so these are the sabbija samadhis, the samadhis with seed. All meditations on an object are of 4 types. With gross thoughts, savitarka. Without gross thoughts, nirvitarka. And once you let go of the gross, what do you get? You get the subtle. Savichara samapati. Without them, it's beyond them, it's nirvichara samapati. And then comes the deep absorption, which is called nirbija samadhi, which is still it's the last sutra of this chapter. Remember, this chapter 1 of Yoga Sutras is entitled Samadhi Pada. It is the pada, the chapter that is on samadhi. So it ends with the highest meaning of samadhi, Sutra 51. As one gains proficiency in the undisturbed flow of nirvichara, a purity and luminosity of the inner instrument of the mind is developed. There's still a mind, but it's making pretty good progress. The experiential knowledge that is gained in that state is one of essential wisdom and is filled with truth. The fancy word for that is ratambra. How do you put a word on it? What's left of your mind, it has a sort of understanding of all this troublesome crap that I've been laying on you here in the last half hour or so, hour now. And then internally, through the sadhana, some way you internally start to say, this is a trap. Everywhere I go, I end up in cognitive dissonance, and this is how this works, and I'm getting some sense of that. This is the spirit of Ratambra, and so we get that. And this is where we get prajna. And remember, in Sutra 20 of Chapter 1, prajna was one of the things we're seeking. Remember? Shraddha, Virya, Smriti, Samadhi, Prajna are the 5 things we're seeking. So here we come back at the end of this section, and it's talking about here comes the Prajna. That knowledge, that Ratambra knowledge, is different from all other knowledge that is commingled. All this other lower knowledge is commingled. with testimony, with inference, with all of our beautiful thinking. It's commingled. This knowledge is not commingled with all of this incredible other knowledge that we have thought was knowledge, but that is really not. This is not commingled. It stands alone. And so all of our wonderful inference, reasoning, and deduction that we think is so powerful is not. But here we really are realizing that. This type of knowledge that is filled with truth creates latent impressions in the mind field. In other words, it's creating new samskaras. And it's creating new samskaras that realizes things like we were saying here in the comments. Starts to realize, look, every time I go down the path of thinking that today I'm not a fool, yesterday I was a fool, and today I'm not, it keeps happening. And now I have a wisdom that, wait a minute, there's the pattern. I keep falling into the same trap of thinking I'm smart and I'm an idiot because I'm Atman or something like that. There's those samskaras. So we are creating new samskaras that are samskaras of a yogi. It's still not, you cannot have a samskara of Atman. You can't have that. But you can.
No samskaras.
Huh?
There's no samskaras.
No, there's no samskaras. But we can have samskaras, deep impressions of what we have learned. This is a playful way of saying it. We can have a samskara about how stupid I am. I keep falling in the same trap over and over. I keep coming to the point where I think finally today I understand something. Yesterday I was a fool. Today I got it. And tomorrow I realize, no, yesterday you were a fool too. And gradually I come to see that that's true. And there is a memory trace of that. And I realize I'm screwed. So this was why on that day, Swamiji said, how are you doing? I said, I'm stuck because I had this level of understanding. There's not a damn thing I can do. That's what happened on that day. And so this samskara, this knowledge that's talking about here is what had happened by now after all the effort. This is what happened to him after the 17 years when he said to the teacher one day, I've been at this and either you're not going to give me Shakti or you can't. I'm going to go suicide. I'm going to go jump in the river and drown myself because my desire for truth is so great, like Nachiketas, that when I reincarnate, I will reincarnate in a better circumstance with somebody who actually has the capability of guiding me. So in the meantime, I'm going to kill myself. Not a good idea.
And I also know that being in that frustrative mode again is something that mind can take on, because we have read the books, and often mostly when my mind gets into that mode, and you catch it, then I'm even holding on to that stance, because mind then just, again, anything to latch on, even that.
It's familiar.
Mm-hmm.
When even these latent impressions from truth-filled knowledge, even this level of knowledge must be transcended, because it too is false. That's why it came out of me. I'm not saying I was intellectually, intelligently figuring this out. It was not. It's total exasperation. Says, well, what do you want? I just said, I just want it to be over. I just want the journey to be done. It was not the wisdom that says, okay, now I want to allow this latest higher wisdom to recede back where it came from.
Can I go back?
It was not that. It was just total exasperation. And from there, then comes the objectless, the nirbija samadhi. And this is the end of this chapter. So this is the end of chapter 1 of the Yoga Sutras, but in the sections, the way we've divided up the sections here, remember the last section we talked about last time was stabilizing the mind. And this whole block of sutras here, which is 11 sutras, I labeled it as being, what did I call it? After
results of stabilizing the mind.
After stabilizing the mind. It doesn't mean that, okay, now I've stabilized my mind, now everything's going to be cool. It means, no, now that you got a stabilized mind, now you can really go crazy. You thought you were troubled before, you ain't seen nothing yet. And I'm trying to say that humorously because I know that this is hard stuff. I'm not trying to be difficult with any of you. I'm not.
So this Yoga Sutra starts with the most difficult stuff right in the first chapter.
Yeah, right. Bang, it gives it to you. It gives it to you, and here it is, and right between the eyes. Bang.
And for those of you who are not smart enough, then chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter 4.
No, then it goes into okay, now that we understand the problem, what do we do with it?
Not the process.
And that's when you get into chapter 2. And if we are able to hold the spirit of all of this that we talked about in chapter 1, if we're able to hold that at all, then when we start going through the sequence of practices that are in chapter 2, then it will make some degree of sense. Because we must operate from inside of our avidya, our ignorance. If we are under the influence of avidya, of the ignorance, because we have fallen asleep, we have forgotten that we are pure consciousness, we have forgotten our divine light, or however you want to say it, and I am an ignorant person. Now, my starting point is I'm an ignorant fool. Okay, what do I do from here? And when you go back to Nachiketa, the Katha Yama, then he was asking the question. He understood. I'm absolutely stuck. Now, Mr. Yama, what do I need to do? And then once you understand, once you have an understanding like this that we've been through, that I'm totally entrapped in this bullshit, then we can pose the question that says something along the lines of, okay, now what do I need to do? How do I get out of this mess? Then the simplicity of chapter 2 can be seen. Stabilize the conscious mind, purify the conscious mind, then deal with the subtler, deal with the karmashaya. How do I do that? Use the instrument called viveka, discernment, so that we can gradually set aside the ragas, deveshas, and abhiniveshas, the attractions, the aversions, and fears. I'm not afraid. I don't have any fears. I used to have fear, but not anymore, says the ego. It's just the absolute terror of losing its own ego, and on like that. Anyway, so we'll stop. I went over. I lost track of the clock there.
And it was called from fire department was smoke outside the building.
Yeah, smoke outside the building. And so Matri is, wore her out. Look at that face.
Okay.
Now you can say something wise, Ma. You can summarize this whole thing while I've been on a rant for an hour.
I have nothing to add. We just keep doing, and we just keep going.
But there's a couple things in that section that I think are pretty basically simple, and I think are very, very exciting. I like them a lot. I'll just say them again. One is the idea that turn our mind into something that operates like a transparent crystal.
Yes.
So that it's so clear that when I put an object in it, I really see it totally clearly, and it's not being inundated with all the other stuff. That's pretty cool. And what a beautiful metaphor it is. Make it like a transparent crystal. And the idea that says, attempt to start to be able to meditate on the smallest and the largest. And that we have invented reality on the basis of names and particular objects and forms, like apples or cows or cars. Those were the 3 examples we talked about. And that we build a reality on that kind of basis. And so there is a simplicity there in the midst of all that. And as we allow ourselves to see the depth a little bit more, then it'll just drive you crazy, and that's okay. What's not fun is being entirely deluded. It's tremendous fun, because contained within that delusion, Jamie, there is, what's that word, Ma?
Freedom.
Freedom.
They say, right?
Huh?
Ignorance is bliss.
Yeah, there's the statement. Zachary says it all. Ignorance is bliss. There is a bit of freedom. Once we know that we're deluded, once we know we're crazy, there's a certain freedom in that, isn't there? And anyway, so. Funny, listen to what you just did, Jamie. Funny, being more of a generalist, I really don't think of a specific cat. Now applies, yes, organic gala. Now apples, yes. I'm not going to go far with this, Jamie, because if I do, you'll end up thinking that I'm just being obnoxious to you, the personality called Jamie. But you have fallen into the trap when you say, I am a generalist. That's absolute bullshit. That's deluded. And if you want to, we all can call ourselves anything that we want, but it's a trap. Anyway. So, have a nice meditation, everybody.
Good luck.
Maybe, just maybe, you can allow all of this to sink in. And if you do, it will help your meditation. It really, really does. All I'm going to do is sit here and let this mind be as clear as a crystal and be able to expand and contract from the minutest to infinity and everywhere in the middle. And therein I find freedom that is where? On the other side of the Om.
Other side of the chart.
Huh?
On the other side of the chart. On the other side of the chart.
On the other side of the chart. On the right-hand side of the chart. For those who think politics, that means the right is coming out ahead. Uh-oh.
I didn't mean it that way. I meant it more literally.
We caught you. We knew what you meant.
No, you just read too much into it.
No, but that's the fun of it. That's the fun of this world, is understand when we're reading too much into something, because that's what we're all doing constantly. We're reading too much into everything. And if we know that that's what we're doing, then we can laugh our ass off over how silly our minds are. And humor is really, really a wonderful, wonderful thing, isn't it?
Especially if it's fun.
Especially if it is funny. All right, so I'm going to shut up now. Thank you, Ma, for staying up in the middle of the night and keeping company while I go through my
Ma,
reading.
we miss you.
We miss you.
I'm back in 2 weeks.
She's back in 2 weeks. And then I'll be quiet and just quietly walk around like a sattvic little mouse.
We're going to wind him up like a cuckoo clock, and then he just spits out all kind of wisdom. Watch out.
I know him. I've been hanging out with him for many years.
Uh-oh. Good night, all. Good morning, Ma. Have a little rest.
Yeah, I'll sit a little and get scrambled and then sleep.
There you go. And then it will be all okay.
Absolutely.
I'm going to let Raj have the last word here with the phrase mind-blowing. That's a good thing. Let the mind get blown, and then we can go beyond the mind.
Yes.
Let it explode. This is actually a way of describing what happens, but I won't go there because I'll get started all up again. Mind-blowing is a good thing.
Om Tat Sat.
Om Tat Sat. Om Tat Sat. Boom! Om Tat Sat. Boom! Good night, all. Thank you for playing and enjoying and all of that.
It's a joy.
Dooey dooey.